Well, welcome everyone to the Real Life, Real Conversations with people who have had amazing success from around the world. Today's guest is from Barcelona, but these days he lives in Texas. He's the CEO Confidant. He's a philanthropist, the leader of his own business. He coaches high-level executives on global expansion. And I hear he is a very, very nice guy, and we're all going to find about that today. Welcome to the podcast, Angel Ribo.
Thank you very much, Rob. You were very kind with your introduction, very warm. And obviously, thank you also to the audience who's listening to us. What an opportunity. Thank you so much.
Mate, not a problem at all. Texas is a long way from Barcelona, mate. Let's go back before we get into what you do these days. What was life like in Barcelona? Because I don't know many people who would know much about that beautiful place of the world.
Yeah, so I was born like 1 hour away from Barcelona, but when my mom and dad decided, thankfully, gratefully decided to send me to college, I chose a college, technical university in Barcelona, and that's why I ended up in Barcelona with 17 years old, and then I lived in there for many years until the 90s, and then I left Spain for good in the 90s. But if I had to blame someone why someone did that, I would probably have to blame mom and dad, because they first, number one, they made me study French when I was in school since third grade, and at the same time they signed me up for a private school outside normal hours for English. So fast forward, I was like 12th grade, like finishing high school, and I was able to speak fluently both languages. And I think that definitely, conditioned in a positive way my life. Yeah. And that, I've lived in 7 or 8 countries already. And yeah, the last one is Texas, where I live now. I've been here for 10 years with my family. So yeah, I've been really blessed. I think it's thanks to my mom and dad.
So I hear learning French sort of can help you get a date. Is that true when you were growing up?
Well, French helped me. I'm going to tell you what it helped me with, because I was in 9th grade, and the French teacher said, "Hey, we're going to do this trip to France. It's going to be a 2-week trip. We're going to take a bus from here, and we're going to go to France. We're going to visit all those amazing castles of this Loire River. Yes, amazing places, all of them." And, I was in charge of organizing it. So he said, "You, Mr. Ribo," because we used to be called in school by our last names. "Oh, Mr. Ribo, you're going to be organizing this, and I'm going to be supporting you while you organize it." Yep. And I had to say I paid the least amount of money of everybody attending that trip. So it was good. My experience with France has always been really positive, to your point, Rob.
So you're a good CEO back then by getting everyone else to pay your way.
Yeah, but nobody knows. Actually, it's the first time ever I disclosed this bit of information. So if any elementary school mate was right now listening, would say, "Oh my God, I cannot believe you seem to be so honest. Come on, Angel.
You were honest. Break. You did all the work."
Exactly, I did all the work.
So what did you study at uni?
Great question. I studied computer engineering. I have to confess that after the second semester, I hated it. Yes. But I was really good in computers at high school, so I picked computer engineering. I had a good mark. Depending on the grade you have, you can get to better universities. I got a good one. I chose, my first choice was that particular school, but I didn't like it. So actually, I had to really, really, really row against the stream for many semesters, until I reached probably like the last 2 semesters, where all the subjects were like less like technical oriented, but more business oriented and business wide impact kind of subjects, and that I really liked a lot. And then I did an MBA at the same university when I finished.
So did you go straight into corporate life after that, or did you do
I actually stayed?
What happened?
You're asking so many great questions. It's funny how nobody has asked me this before. Actually, I stayed at my university because I was so frustrated. Yes. I stayed and I worked for the rector, which is the president of the university. Mm-hmm. He had an international office. Mm-hmm. So he said, "I think you would be a good guy for our international office." And exactly. So I was working for the rector's office for 4 years before I jumped to my first ever corporate job in Barcelona.
Yep. Wow. So you've said, I was reading up about you, you've lived in a couple of other countries before moving to America. Where did you go after Barcelona to get
I've
to the
lived,
States?
yeah, well, that's a great question again. I lived in Czechoslovakia when they were still communist.
Yes.
For a few months because I had an internship there. I was very active while I was getting my degree, and I was getting internships almost every single year. I also lived in France. I lived in Finland as well.
Yes.
Then I moved to the UK, and that was the last time I lived in Europe. My last place where I lived was in the UK. And then I moved to Latin America. I lived in Mexico first, and then I lived in Cuba, and then I lived in Mexico again. And then I moved to the US, where I have been for the last 10 years. That has been kind of my international itinerary.
And was there a reason you picked Texas, or was that the family choice?
So I have 3 kids. 10 years ago, they were much younger, obviously.
Yes.
And education for me was extremely important. You know, one of my kids had some challenges, so I wanted to give my kid the best education possible when I was coming to the country.
Yep.
And someone that was working with me said, hey, if you go to that particular place in Texas, the school district is amazing. You're going to be supported. You're going to have everything that you need and your kid needs moving forward. And that's the reason, because the company I relocated with, they told me, hey, we have like 30, 40 different offices in the country. You pick whatever you want to go. You can go to California, you can go to Massachusetts. I picked Texas.
Yep. Awesome. I've been to the States many times. I haven't been to Texas yet, but it is on my wife and my checklist to go to. So I hear it's a lovely place.
You will have a lot of fun. I can guarantee you that. And you will see a lot of cowboys too.
Well, we have a few in Australia if you leave out of the city limits, and
exactly.
Very, very similar. You're known around the world as the CEO Confidant.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get into what was that, who has been the biggest influence in a business sense in you growing up to become who you are today, TV presenter and everything else?
Yeah, I would say that it's probably my father. You know, my father was an entrepreneur. He originally, he was born in the country.
Yep.
There's still a Ribo ranch in Spain, in the north of Spain. Yeah. So he was born there, and I would spend all my summers there playing with my cousins. And so my father, you know, when I was a kid, he already had a couple of companies, and he was the CEO for a couple of different companies. And I was growing up, he was diversifying, and he ended up working in many different industries, mainly food and energy generation, eventually industrial gases as well. So, and he was definitely the person that most inspired me. Actually, I worked with him for a very short period of time in the energy industry, but he was definitely the one. And I would say that the trait that helped me the most is probably the way in which he was present, and he was extremely positive. Extremely positive. You know, he would be the guy that he would get into a room and he would change the humor of the entire room.
Yes.
You know, nothing was impossible for him. Nothing. And in perspective, I mean, if you think about someone coming out of, you know, the countryside, his first ever job outside, you know, not the cows, but the sheep and the goats and the wheat fields was actually as a carpenter. That was his first, you know, profession ever, was being a carpenter, because a cousin of him taught him. So, and he ended up, you know, closing those, you know, multi-million-dollar deals with huge financing, you know, American corporations in the world. So definitely he's been the one. He's still alive. So
he sounds like the Spanish version of Tony Robbins when it comes to positivity.
Maybe, yeah. He's very, very a very good friend of his friends, and the other way around because of this.
Yeah, look,
and showing up, you know, when you go, it's funny because when I go to any store with my kids, the younger ones are 10 and 12, and they are embarrassed of their father because he speaks so much, and he always establishes this relationship with everybody. That's who I am, you know. So I think I've inherited that, and I think that has helped me tremendously in my business life.
Yes. Look, as they say, they used to call it relationship selling, and it is an art that people have not forgotten, but haven't been taught these days. And a lot of CEOs don't understand the value. Modern CEOs, they go to university, they've got their head buried in their phone when they're not in a lecture. They have no idea and do not have the ability to create a relationship before you do business, which is how it should be done. And you get a lot longer business out of doing it that way.
I agree. Very often I'm being asked, what's the number one challenge that you see, with CEOs in large corporations? And I always answer the same thing. It's the ivory tower syndrome.
Yes.
The ivory tower syndrome. Right? And it's not that they're bad people,
No.
it's just like, they have been focusing about, this way of doing things and actually reporting to their boards. And we have to acknowledge they are there to secure shareholder value. That's what they do.
Yes.
That's what they do. They have been hired to do this, to ensure shareholder value and growth and profitability and free cash flow, so they can expand and etc. But very often once they reach that point, they miss this other part of the role, which is keep in touch, with the ranks.
Yes.
With the ranks, and that makes a big difference today. There's a almost $1 billion company here in the retail store company here in the U.S. They sell basically optics equipment.
Yes.
Like B2C. So the CEO personally knows. They have hundreds and hundreds of stores in the US. The CEO personally knows every single GM of every single store. And I'm talking about stores that have at most, like at the same time, like 5-6 employees working. So that's the kind of CEO. And that's the kind of CEO that if you send him a book because you think it would be beneficial for the entire company, he's going to send a personal note signed by himself saying, "Thank you, Mr. or Mrs. that you work on that particular store in that particular state, for thinking that we can make the company better by me reading this book." So this is a big thing today. Absolutely, I agree with you about relationships.
Now, when you look after and consult to companies who want to expand globally and CEOs and how they do that, for my listeners, what do you see as the difference between a manager and a leader? Because at your level, you'd be dealing with both.
Exactly, and I would say, well, I always like to say that leaders take ownership of their team's issues and challenges. That's what I would like to say all the time, because if I ever learned myself anything of leadership, it was through that. Yes. It was through, okay, so I don't know you guys. I have just inherited you as a team, right? Yes. Getting a new role or having to develop a completely new sales channel or distribution channel, just to say something, just as an example. I would say, hey, I know nothing about this business. I know nothing about you guys, so being very extremely transparent, setting the right expectations, being very humble, and say, we're gonna do this together. Tell me what you guys need in order to be better people, in order to be better businessmen, businesswomen, in order to be, at the end of the day, you care probably more about profitability and cash flow than myself. I work for this large corporation, but you are actually a business owner. You know what I mean? Yes. So we have to put ourselves inside the boots of the people that we lead. And being a manager is good. It's good to manage people, but at the same time, I think that being a good leader helps you tremendously to be a great manager.
Yeah, oh man, awesome. If the world in the last 18 months has been turned on its head, we've been saying we're not going to go back to how it is, we're just moving forward to change. Do you see many CEOs struggling now with the pace of change and them not being maybe in control as they would like to be?
Yeah, there's uncertainty definitely everywhere, that's for sure. But I think that in general, CEOs, they adapt fast. And you see that also in large corporations. Yeah. And you see, in corporations, everybody is in fear. I mean, we're at the end of the day, we're all human. Yes. CEOs are human, but they're used to take action fast and now, right? So as soon as they started to see, the rabbit, the rabbit ears,
Yes, yes,
above the fence. You know what I mean? Above the fence. Then they said, so we might have to do something. And
yes,
this is not going to be the same as, the last H1N1, or it's not going to be the same as 2008, 2009. It's not going to be the same one. So this one is different. And so are they struggling? Of course they are struggling, but they're struggling because every single organization is continuously changing.
yes.
So right now, obviously, on the one side, they have to accelerate many changes, right? But on the other side, please remember, Rob, as well, that there's so much going on that at the end of the day, also, it's much easier to conduct this change than other changes inside the corporations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it's been like an epiphany for every CEO, because things like overall are like massively going in the same direction, that there's this much higher good, right? Well, there's controversy about this, but there's this much higher good that everybody has to abide by. So
Yes.
we have to do this, like it or not, right? And again,
True.
I don't want to get into politics or economics, or
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
If you understand, obviously you understand what I mean, but it's true. So it's the magnitude of this change in our environment has been so massive, but so homogeneous and consistent, that it has made also things easy for them to make the changes inside the organizations that they had to make.
Yeah, I was interviewing someone the other day from London, and they were talking about what you just said then, how different demographics look at businesses differently. And there are certain demographics that just go for price. Some just go, well, I've always bought that product, I'll keep buying that product. And others look at what they, in their core beliefs and ethics, what that company does. And they check up if that company says we're donating so much money to the needy somewhere in the world, they will go and check that they're actually doing it before they actually buy the product. And the challenge is trying to be able to look after all the different demographics and their needs and their wants and how they choose to buy. And they're very, very different. As we hope by the end of this year, we come out of this post-COVID challenge that we have around the world, what do you see is going to be the biggest change with your customers when they come to dealing and expanding globally?
Obviously, moving physically around is going to be a big challenge.
Yeah.
So being able to, obviously, there is always going to be the need of products and services that are being created in one part of the planet on another part of the planet.
Yes.
That is always going to be like this, just because every single part of the planet, and we were talking about innovation before, right?
Yes.
Every single part of the planet, every culture, every geography has different levels of development. That
True.
is what it is. Right. So not every single geography is going to be good, even just taking into consideration, resources, natural resources. Not
Yes.
everybody's going to have the same products, the same services. So there's always going to be a need, like, to balance globally products and services. That's always going to happen. So the problem now is probably that, how are you going to be to make sure that the world is going to adapt, so that if you still want to use internationalization or globalization as a way to expand your business or to accelerate the growth of your business, you will still want to really know, and you were talking about consumers just a minute ago, you still need to know what is going to move that particular consumer in that particular area, right?
Yes.
So that's why I think that now that the physical movement, the physical mobility, that's the right word, it's going to be more challenging. I think that people that have the expertise and the knowledge of how to systematically approach new markets and land on those markets and being able to adapt or first analyze and then adapt those products and services into this new, geography and this new, habits, consumption habits of this, population. I think it's going to be really an important. It's already an important challenge for many companies.
I see. I was talking to a CEO the other day, and he was telling me how some companies, and I'll use a production term, is they have taken their base load for granted while expanding. So where their base, which basically pays their bills, and there when they expand is their profit. And so they're looking at all expansion, but what COVID has proven, they've now turned back, well, we can't export here or export there. I've got to go back to my normal market. Oh dear, my normal market now has 3 or 4 competitors who were really eating into our profits and our market share. Do you see that continuing, where CEOs who haven't got their eye on the ball maybe have missed some of the opportunities that could be right in front of them rather than just looking overseas?
You see how funny this is? You just gave me an example of someone that was really being challenged because of, he might have forgotten his backyard, right? He might have forgotten that, he used to be maybe number one in his local market. Now he's not anymore. And now he's having problems. That's why, again, I think that the question is not if, the question is how. The question is, how do you do that? So do I see these challenges? I think that yes, but short term. To answer your question,
yes.
I see that those challenges are going to be short term challenges in which you will be more struggling with your local market or trying to adapt locally if you were not ready before. That's for sure. Yep. But again, I think this is going to be short term, because eventually, it's like, I was really bad at chemistry. Yes. Very bad. But there's a term that I really liked a lot, which is entropy. Entropy is the level of disorder of particles in any given space of three-dimensional space. So I think that eventually human beings are so amazing and so incredible that eventually they will find the way to keep on growing internationally, but using different strategies. That's why I said it's not if, it's how do we have to do this now, considering that the constraints are different. There are more constraints, and the constraints are different. But also at the end of the day, I was talking about this common denominator, right? That the entire world, the 7.5 billion people are going through the same challenge at the same time on a planetary level, right? Well, that also makes things easier for many people, because everybody knows that this uncertainty and this fear, well, who is not in uncertainty and fear mode right now? You tell me. Only a few crazy like you and me, maybe. You know what I'm trying to say? You know that individuals at the human level, right? At the human level, they are suffering this.
Yes.
It's a reality. And we all cope with fear and uncertainty in a different way, but Yeah.
I always try to coach people when they have fear and uncertainty. I say, use it as fuel. Use failure as fuel. Use fear as fuel.
That's a great answer.
Turn it around, it'll get you to where you need to be. Or if you do the other, it'll hold you back.
Yeah, it's a great answer. That's why I think we are brought up, we are raised to actually allow fear to stop us, like stalled.
Yes.
We are stalled. How many people has not been stalled for the last 12 months, or maybe let's say April till now, stalled. So this is a great, this is a great way to actually play with the minds of people, to make them realize that this is one of their superpowers.
It is
one of their superpowers. When they're asking, people sometimes ask, what do you think is your superpower? I think that converting fear into fuel, into excitement, into opportunity, into a solution, I think that's great.
Look, I spoke
that path.
I spoke to a young fellow one day. He was, talking to me about he wasn't very good at sport. And in Australia, it's cricket, could be baseball. It doesn't matter what it was. And I looked at him, and he was using fear for not going out there. He said, I'm not as good as everyone else. And I said, Joe, it's better to go out and swing and miss than to carry the oranges. And he looked at me. I said, because no one ever remembers who carried the oranges, buddy.
True.
And he never carried the oranges again for the rest of the season.
Yeah, true.
He didn't need a lot of runs, but he still had a ball. As we move on through what's going on, and you're going to see a very different type of CEO before COVID to afterwards. If a CEO came to you and said, Angel, what is the one skill I need to make sure I can excel at for what is going to be coming after we get through this pandemic, what would you say to them?
My favorite mantra in business has always been take imperfect action now.
Yeah.
Take imperfect action now. I think that if I had to pick only one thing, I would say that you should be able to lead in a way that totally aligns your organization. Okay.
That's an
There's many
interesting
different,
one.
there's many different ways to do that.
Yes.
And again, I know that, CEOs at the end of the day, they go to the principal's office, AKA board of directors,
Yes.
right? To present the results. I know that they have to do that, but still, that's definitely the one thing that I think that they should be excelling in right now.
Yeah.
Again, because remember this, everybody talks about herd immunity, right? So right now they have a whole team of tens or hundreds or thousands, large corporations of people that are following them, blind eyes. So right now, being authentically the human being that the people expects to see in you is more relevant than ever before. Again, remember, when people are in fear, they stall, they stop, they are blocked. You can't be rational with them.
No.
You cannot put numbers on the table to show them that they have to do A, B, and C. You have to touch upon their human side. And not everybody is able to do that. No. That's why I said, you have to be able to make sure that you excel on that relationship, on that leadership that will allow you to develop and have more genuine relationships and connections with your employees than any time before. That definitely is right now, clearly for me, the number one challenge and the number one piece of advice I would give them.
Now, leading on from that, I did dig in about you a little, and I hear that you have another passion, and it's about helping kids in South America become mini entrepreneurs, but using local resources. What's that all about?
Yes. So when I was living in Latin America, I lived there for almost 10 years.
Yes.
I was working for several corporations. All the time I was basically helping them develop business in different, qualities, in different categories. And all the time I was doing like a consultative kind of sale. Yeah. So I was always reaching out to the C-levels of those corporations, to the CEOs of those corporations to close those deals. I would always have 2 or 3, face-to-face meetings with those CEOs in order to close those deals. What does that have to see with underprivileged kids in Latin America? Well, most of the time, the kind of corporations I was serving were corporations that would have manufacturing plants outside the cities.
Yes.
Or even rural areas or in suburbs, right? So typically in the third world, when you go to these areas, those areas are really the underprivileged areas. These are the areas that have the most poverty. So every time I was going to one of those fancy C-level meetings to close a deal or to start a negotiation, every single time, like 5 minutes before, I was parking my car outside this manufacturing plant, and some kid would come to me and say, hey, would you buy some gum from me? Would you allow me to protect your car while you are inside? Will you allow me to clean your car, to maybe wash your car while you are inside? So all the time, because whenever I stopped, even at the traffic lights, there would be kids offering me things. That's what happens in third world countries. So all the time I was like connecting with the high level, high net worth people. And at the same time, the same day, I was meeting with these very underprivileged poor kids. And that was happening to me all the time. So I reached a point in which actually I had some sort of a spiritual experience in which I had this very, very, very clear message that I had to use all those connections with these very high level people. I had to use them with the bottom of the world, which is the underprivileged kids in Latin America. And I decided to, so when I had this kind of vision very clear in my mind, I said, okay, let's do something about it. Let's create a foundation. I reached out to a friend of mine. He called his father. All three, we created Wisdom for Kids, which is the foundation that you just named.
Yeah. And in what way did you end up making a difference with those kids?
How do I make a difference with those kids? Basically what we do is we have a path in which we take the kids to. So initially we connect with communities that we know are very high, they have high levels of poverty.
Yep.
We talk to the community leaders. We tell them we want to do this. And then they say, how much it is? And then we said, no, it's for free. So we just want to gather the kids. And then what we do is we organize a series of workshops, which basically open their minds, the minds of those kids, to more possibilities.
Yeah.
The number one boundary that these kids have, is obviously that they think that they're not worth it. They think, their self-esteem is to the ground. Then, they think that they can only do whatever they see, in their environment.
Yeah.
And obviously that's not the world, right? My reality is not their reality. Let me give you an example. I remember going to a community only 25 minutes drive away from Mexico City's airport. Can you believe that I visited several communities of kids in that area? No one had ever seen an airplane. Can you believe that?
No.
So imagine, just 25-minute drive for me.
Yeah.
Those kids had never seen an airplane, maybe on a movie, never a real airplane. It only took someone like a parent or tutor or whoever, to take a ride, but it wasn't out of their scope. When you live in a community, or
Yes.
you are, as you know, it's like when you are pregnant and suddenly, or your wife is pregnant and you see all the pregnant ladies every time you go out. It's the same thing. As you know, we are trying to do this. So these people think that their world, obviously those poor kids, they think that their world is really limited, and the experiences that they are allowed to live in their lives is extremely limited. Obviously, they don't know what they don't know.
That's true.
So,
unconscious incompetence, as we call it. Yeah.
Exactly. So that happens obviously in any area in the world. But imagine someone who has not been as blessed as you and I, someone that has been, unfortunately, limited continuously to the knowledge and wisdom that they have access to.
You've actually just reminded me, I've been in Rotary for 20 years, and we run a program out of Australia and New Zealand into some of the Asian countries above us, where they identify a small town where the kids need to go to school, and we will go in and provide them bikes, second-hand bikes out of Australia and everywhere else, so the girls especially can get an education, so they can ride to school and ride back. Because if they don't, they have to walk there and back, and they're expected to work before school and after school on the family properties. So all of a sudden they get to be able to go to school and come back. And then someone said, well, what else do we need to do? So then they give enough resources to one of the villages to set up the bike repair shop. And so he can repair the bikes for the girls pay him enough to buy stuff. And so it sort of ends up two ways. One, the kids get education. One of the people in the village get a business, and it opens up their opportunities, as you just said, to what's going on in the world.
Exactly. And, obviously we face a lot of challenges. Many times we don't have electricity. Many times we don't have cellular connection, which seems impossible, right? There's literally millions of, square kilometers in the world without cell coverage, because it's not, it doesn't pay off. Those cell towers, would never have a positive ROI in that area. So and sometimes we go to indigenous communities, which actually they have their poverty rates are 95% plus. Imagine, as a city, a normal city, like big city, typically has like 5-10% poverty. You go outside the city, it's 25. You go to the suburbs, it's 50%. But when you go to indigenous communities, so imagine those guys live in the forest or in the mountains, right? Or in the jungle, right? They are so limited. Their reality, their ability to innovate or to find anything outside what they are being taught by their parents and maybe their teachers, if they are lucky enough to have a teacher in their village or in their community, right? That's why, we're going back to the basics. One of the things I take the most with me is books. I get a lot of donations of books here in the US that they take with me to Latin America. And many times those books are the first books in English that those kids have seen, because I take books in English mostly because I want them to have the opportunity to learn. Then obviously every time I take English books with me, I make sure that there's someone in the community who is able to teach the English, or someone that can translate. I have beautiful videos of me reading, actually really a tale book to kids in Latin America, and doing it, obviously translating English and Spanish.
Yeah.
And they have a blast. I mean, as you know, kids are genuine by nature, curious.
Look, poverty in monetary terms does not mean you're unhappy. Because some of the poorest countries in the world, they have the happiest people.
Absolutely.
But also poverty in business can mean knowledge. You have people in business who are very poor when it comes to how much knowledge they know, because again, just like the people in the village, they only know what they know and they don't seek anything more out than what they're told, which is so true. You live in a beautiful place of America called Texas.
Exactly.
And I hear it's known for its steak and its good food.
Yes.
If you are in the capital there, and I managed just to get you a nice little restaurant there with 3 or 4 seats and just you, and I ask all of my guests on my podcast, who would you invite, dead or alive, and why?
Well, probably one of them would be Tony Robbins, because I went to one of his events and he changed my life. I have to say that there were 2 or 3 different concepts I got from that event.
Yes.
Unleash Your Power Within event. I would like to have him sit on my table, because I know that he has coached the most influential people in the planet.
Yes.
That's why.
Yep.
Okay. So that would be definitely one of them. The second one would be someone that I think that his knowledge and his experience, I know him personally, but I would still sat him on my table.
Yes.
His name is Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Yes.
And he's a very well-known neuroscientist here in the US. And he's been able to demonstrate scientifically, the power of our mind. I am fascinated about the human power, which is untapped. I think that we are geniuses, literally geniuses with a lot of untapped potential.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why people in those underprivileged communities are so happy is because they value what they have and they don't know what they don't have. True. So that helps a lot. So in reality, most of them, they have a mindset of abundance, as opposed to many of us who have a scarcity mindset, because we know everything else we could have, but we don't. Those will be my number 1 and my number 2. My number 3 would probably be a world record of some sort. I love sports, I have to tell you. Probably Carl Lewis, because he excelled in many different, disciplines, and long jump and he was very, very, very competitive. And I like to see people who go beyond the normal human capacity of this physical body that we are in. So I would probably, those would be the 3 people I would invite.
Mate, Tony Robbins does come up quite a bit. He is an amazing individual. I have been to one of his events too, and it did change my life. And I love to hear what everyone else and why, but it is an ongoing theme with people that we interview, that they love people who challenge them. They love people who have excelled. And I think that probably reflects more back on you, because that's what you like to do. You like to push your clients and your companies that you look after. And it does show. So, man, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Please stay safe and well over there in Texas.
Thank you.
And, we look forward to catching up with you again. And as I always say to everyone on the podcast, have a groovy day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here. Obviously, thank you very much for the opportunity, Robert. Here in Texas, you have a home whenever you come to this latitude and longitude, okay? And obviously, thank you, everybody here in the audience. It's been a pleasure to be able to share my life with you.
Not a problem. We catch you soon.